So not even the first question, but can you possibly be as funny as that?
That's a hard act to do.
No way.
It is possible. Peter, can you get that photo up there or not? Is it going to work? There we go. So the idea behind interviewing Steph and Todd, and we'll get into what they do now later, but came up. I think Deb Mesh in our office said, "Oh, you should get Todd and Steph to come to the event." And I'm like, "Great, let's do it." So I get them on the phone, and they say to me, "Okay, watch the series, okay, Valley of the Boom, right? Is that what it was called?" Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so they said, "Watch the series, and based on what you see, you can come up with some questions." And so I said, "That's like homework." So these guys are giving me homework. I'm like, "Okay." So I watched the series, and I'm thinking, that this guy looks like Steph. I mean, he does. Like, you can tell who's plays Steph, right? Kind of, cool man up there, hoodie, kind of. And then I'm like, who the heck is this guy playing you? Because he looks nothing like you, and he's like twice your girth, right? And I'm like, why?
This is a weight loss story.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
But you were probably just even littler back then.
Ouch.
Yeah. I mean, well, you're older now, so this happens to all of us. So, I mean, did you have any influence over how this casting happened?
No, zero.
No, none.
This all happened by surprise. In fact, they had approached me via email 2-3 years ago to say, "Oh, we're doing a documentary about the beginning of the internet, and we want to feature theglobe.com," and I didn't think anything of it. And then a year later, they said, "Oh, yeah, our show's greenlit. Could you come in for an interview?" I didn't think of anything of it, and it was halfway through the interview, which was taking forever, and they had way too many notes in my book, and I started getting worried, like, wait, what's up with this interview? It seems to be more expansive than I realized. And the next day or the day after that, I suddenly got an email from a casting service saying, actually it was from a friend, because I'm in the film industry now, and I have a friend who said, "Hey, there's a casting call for an actor to play a Steph Paternot and a Todd Krizelman and a Mark Andreessen."
And there could only be a couple of them, right?
Well, whatever was going on was very suspicious, and I freaked out for a second. I think I got in touch with Todd right away to say something weird's going on here. This isn't a documentary interview. They're doing a scripted series. And we had zero involvement beyond the interview. I'd already basically finished my interview before I realized that there's this whole other story they're going to be doing with actors. And it just sort of all happened to us.
And Todd, did you have a similar experience, or they just...
I think from that first experience, we were mostly afraid of the press. We had a lot of press in that first company, and so we for sure called each other, and we were trying to do research to figure out if the showrunner had a good reputation, whether he would essentially go out and screw people like us, or whether he would represent the story more fairly.
He was an Emmy-winning showrunner for a show called House of Lies. And so my first thought was, this is not going to go well. This is going to be a disaster. We're going to be portrayed as two guys locked up in a Turkish prison. I don't know, something really weird. And luckily,
Midnight
it didn't
Express
go that
all over again? Do you guys remember the film Midnight Express?
Oh yeah, that's the one I'm
younger
thinking
folks
of.
don't.
Like, I was worried that was going to be the story. Yeah. But no, it worked out well. I think they were very kind to us and portrayed us as a sort of a love story of two business partners.
They did. I watched the whole thing. I did watch the whole thing.
Yeah.
It was definitely a love story at some points.
Well, compared to one of the third storylines, I think we came off as saints.
Yeah, you did. So actually, let's just frame it for the audience. So tell the audience, perhaps Todd, what theglobe.com was, when you started it at Cornell, and what it actually did.
So theglobe.com was a social network. Now, at the time, we called it online community. That was the vocabulary of 1994. But it was a social network at a time, however, before you could make as much money doing it. But what's super interesting, and it was literally all the same stuff, chatting and talking and posting, and all of the legal issues. What's so interesting is so many of the legal issues that are now every day in the press were absolutely clear back then. We had an amazing lawyer, Eric Goldman, who was a young guy at the time. He had just graduated from getting a law degree at Hastings at UCLA, who stayed up all night lecturing us about all the ethical quandaries that were going to confront us. And we were totally ill-prepared for that at 21 and at 30. But for sure, he was really good at forecasting all of the problems.
So you basically invented Facebook, kind of, early on. I mean, I'm being a little sarcastic, but while you were students, right? Were you still students?
Yeah.
And by the way, they had their offices where? Like, what? Remember the address?
409 College Ave.
And do you all know, is that 409 College Ave now? Like our eHub co-working space? Like
And that was an upgrade because we actually started in the Theory Center in a windowless closet. we were in a storage room and we got credit. We managed to convince I can't remember his name in the computer science department.
Thorsten.
There was Thorsten, but there was someone else who was working with the students to figure out Dan Jenkins.
Yeah.
Oh my God. And Dan was a bit of a cool cat in the computer science department and was like, you know what, I can hook you guys up. And he got us hooked up with Thorsten, and Thorsten hooked us up with the Theory Center. And we opened up the door, and it was a storage room with a bunch of boxes with old tests and some Unix computer screens.
It was horrible.
And we were like, oh, thanks. This is really cool. But that's where we started.
Did you actually work in there?
Oh, absolutely.
We worked in there, and it was thanks to the fact that the Theory Center had 10 megabit internet, Ethernet, which was huge. And we hooked up some Macs, and we launched our chat rooms, and basically launched the Globe out of that room. And it's thanks to the unlimited bandwidth that they gave us that our traffic went up exponentially for the first year before Cornell got a little wiser and said, like, Todd and I didn't want to risk owing Cornell for this, so we quickly moved off campus, College Ave, 409 College Ave, and then it became an official commercial.
Right.
And we lost money for years, so there was no risk that we were profitable at the beginning at all.
So Cornell never took a stake in that because they let you use the closet, which is good.
Correct.
Right, which I'm very grateful for.
But it wasn't clear back in those days either that there was no internet zillionaires, there were no .com success stories, so there was no risk for them to say yes.
Right,
help
right.
us.
So I mean, the show puts you in the same light. Let's just focus on Netscape and Mark Andreessen and leave the other crazy guy out of it for now, because that's fine. But I mean, was the Globe really as big as Netscape? I mean, and people in the internet hype.
I don't know if it was as big, but it was very close. And all those guys who were starting Netscape and also the team from Yahoo, all of this in the world was so small. This is so important to frame it. It was just other teams of students. And Mark Andreessen was just another student getting out of undergrad in Illinois.
Yeah, and the show mentions this, that when the internet is starting, the total population using it is half the size of California. So there's something like 20 million people using the internet. Netscape was the first browser, and then we were one of the first sites that you could go and engage with and chat and do all these things. And so, no, we weren't as big in the sense that Netscape, their product was the first browser into the internet. Their IPO was seminal and went up 300%, and they became a $3 or $4 or $5 billion company. People started to talk about the internet, and by the time we came along with our IPO a few years later, we had maybe 10 million users, or I don't remember if we were 5 or 10 million users at the time, but eventually about 10% of the internet was using the Globe every single month. And our IPO story ended up eclipsing Netscape's because it went up 1,000% in one day. And so that sparked off in people's minds the whole .com mania. Well, if these two kids can do it, anyone can do it. So that story ended up having a life of its own. And most people ended up remembering the Globe for that story and not for the fact that we had 20 million users and had everybody using the site.
Right, which is sort of unfortunate in a way. I mean, it would have been nice to have been remembered for all those users, right?
Yeah,
I mean, in a way.
Would have.
And then I don't mean to take away from the fact that it went up 1,000%. That's incredible.
No, we had very mixed feelings. You know, for those who follow, when you watch stock prices go up, the company, if you think about the company and its investors, if the stock goes up the very first day, the company is not benefiting from that. That is just an evidence of a misprice, not just in our experience, but any time there's an IPO ever. If you see the price go up a lot, and it's the bank, the way the bank works is they want to reward their new shareholders with a little pop always. This was true 20 years ago, it's true today. But it's not supposed to pop more than 15, 20% in a day. And so when it pops so much, it's evidence of a misprice. It's also, irrational exuberance, and it's super exciting, and it is. You're in the public consciousness, and we definitely capitalized on that, and we're aware of it. But it also meant we had left all this money on the table. So we felt bad for sure about that.
You did own a good chunk of the company, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Personal. So as the stock price goes up, your personal holdings are getting more valuable.
Yeah, and this was
at least on paper.
On paper,
this is sort of classic classic entrepreneurship 101, which is the owning 100% versus a small piece of a bigger pie. And Todd and I had to learn that as well. We started off with 50-50, and then when we did our first round of financing, which was $10, $15, $20, $30,000, Eric Goldman, our lawyer, who worked at Cooley Godward, which was one of the leading Silicon Valley law firms, said, well, this whole .com thing's very new, but let's price this like a normal startup, $250,000. So that was the first valuation of our company, which by today's standards is a joke.
Right.
So $250,000, we started to dilute 10%. And then eventually, as we raised a couple million more, valuation started moving up. Todd and I had to get comfortable with the idea that we were owning less and less. And by the time we got to the IPO, we had brought in this billionaire investor who bought 50% of our company for $20 million. Again, huge infusion of cash. It was the biggest investment by an individual in internet history, and that allowed Todd and I to grow the company. And we were okay with getting further diluted.
Yep.
And I think at the time of the IPO, we were down to owning maybe 10% each of the company. So at that point, our net worths were $100 million each on a $1 billion company. That's pretty spectacular. By today's standards, it's a rounding error, but it was a big deal.
I would like to still say, still spectacular if you can do it.
Yeah.
It's a lot harder than it sounds, I know, but
No one's going to complain about $1 million, let alone $100 million. So that's actually fabulous. And then what happened after the public offering? Just to kind of close that loop a little bit, and we'll fast forward a bit. So,
well, right after, I think there were lots of things we were so unprepared for. There's like a long list. One, we had never run a publicly traded company, and we were like 28 or 27, and that's a horrible mix.
24, Todd.
were we that young?
We were 24 when we were published.
It's horrible. I don't even,
We were 28
bad.
by the time we quit.
Yeah. So right. So we aged a lot in those years. So it's when I hear people who want, it's like, yeah, when you're thinking about starting a company, the most important thing to start, I actually thought, most of the speakers have talked about this today, it's like the thing that's solving the problem that you feel great about. She talked about how she never felt like fleeing because she was getting customer feedback constantly.
Right.
That is what nourishes you a lot. And I hear that from a lot of entrepreneurs. And right after that is actually control, or at least the illusion of control. And I think you do get that, but no one should become an entrepreneur because they think they're going to get rich or because they think it's going to lead to a better quality of life. Like, there are a lot of things that are much worse, even for people who, is Ms. Too honest? I think it's just a lot of people don't know that. But I think it got worse right away as a public company. We were not prepared for the intensity of the public scrutiny.
Well, then the internet bubble happens and stock price goes poof, right? I mean,
Yep.
and you guys stayed with it though, right? What happened after?
Yes and no. I mean, so we went public in the fall of '98, had that $1 billion IPO. Internet mania kicks into high gear, and so a couple hundred more companies go public the following year and raise multiples more money than us. So we end up getting into this arms race of whoever can raise more and outspend each other. So we go back to the market, do a secondary offering, raise another $140 million, compete. And it becomes clear that there's not enough advertising dollars in the internet world to go around. So everybody's bartering traffic and bartering ad revenue, and everyone's sort of borrowing from Peter to pay Paul. And you end up in a situation in 2001 where the market stops putting money in, stops giving $100 million to everything that's .com. So the music stops. And the chairs that are left, we had some money, we had enough money left that we could continue for a little while. But basically 90% of internet companies saw a 90% decline in their stock values, including Amazon, including Yahoo, everyone. And before our company could collapse, I think Todd and I had our own existential crises, maybe not in perfect unison, but Todd and I both decided at one point this is too much, too fast. We stepped aside as CEOs, brought another CEO in, a much older, wiser person. I'm still going to say wise in quotes because that person didn't know what to do either. And then after the bottom fell out, I mean, they were like a deer in headlight as well. And Todd and I ended up moving on. It took a couple more years.
Yep.
But we got to a point where in 2001, 2002, 2003, you guys might have been too young to remember, but the media was basically saying, yep, and that's the end of the internet. We thought so. Those .com kids didn't know what they were doing. That social networking stuff, we knew that was a joke. And Todd and I, for a minute probably thought like, okay, maybe we were crazy. And it wasn't until 2004 when Google came back full force with this whole concept of AdSense and AdWords, and then Facebook started, and MySpace was somewhere along in there, but traffic was on the rise again. Stock prices were starting to turn around again, and there was the internet renaissance. And that's when people realized, oh no, the internet is here to stay. And I think Todd and I were probably vindicated at some point after Facebook started to become a thing that, oh, social networking is for real. We were just 10 years too early, it cost 10 times too much, and there was 1/10 the revenue available.
But it was sort of fun going through it. I mean, at least based on the show.
It was terrifying.
I mean, I watched the show. You guys had a shitload of fun.
There's a lot more.
Okay,
there were a lot more parties and dancing in the TV show than I remember.
It was a giant flash mob dance sequence for our IPO.
Yeah.
That did not happen.
How about the plastic pants?
They were vinyl.
The vinyl pants.
So no, so they made it fun. Okay, so this show, watching it 25 years later from a safe distance, was a blast. When we were going through it, it was exhilarating because we were racing across uncharted territory. People were hearing about the internet, didn't know what to do about it, and we were doing something. So it was exhilarating, and it was also terrifying because we had no idea what we were doing either. And as Todd said, we did not know how to run a public company. Nobody knew how to build an internet company, how to build revenues. Advertising hadn't been invented until Yahoo started to stick banner ads on the top of their search engine, and then DoubleClick came along, and people were like, I guess maybe this will work? And so we started to use that, but all the tools hadn't been invented yet. So that was sort of terrifying. And when you're a public company, you want to have your business model dialed in completely. You want to be profitable, stable. You want to be able to predict where all your quarters will be. You don't want to be some fly-by-night crazy operation across a new landscape where you can't predict the next year, let alone the next decade. I mean, not even the next quarter.
This is what happened to us after as a result.
Right,
this is how we look back at ourselves.
Yeah.
Slightly scarred.
Yeah, it's okay. Well, who could blame you? I mean, it was probably pretty traumatic, actually. I mean, there's a lot of fun, but still, it's quite an experience. Let's move forward now. Let's start with Todd. So in 2006, you start MediaRadar, right? And tell us what it is and how you raise capital and things of that nature.
So I started a company called MediaRadar in the end of 2006, and it's a company that sells business intelligence to ad sales teams. So the people who sell the ads in this building at the New York Times, at Facebook, at NBC, at Google, completely any type of company. So it doesn't matter what the media format is. We provide almost like a Bloomberg terminal that tells people what to say and who to sell to, and we charge an annual subscription for it. The business is today a business we employ about 560 full-time people here just a couple blocks from here. And it is a super quiet B2B software business, essentially, just data business. And for sure, just like him talking about predictable profits and revenue, so much of the first business influenced and informed everything we did, I did certainly since.
Right, but you also raised about $20 million originally?
Raised $20 million. I raised it from a group called Founder Collective, who are absolutely amazing. One of the three founders of the venture founders is a Cornell alum, Micah Rosenblum. He was the nicest guy in the world. I did not know him. We were in basically school at the same class. And also I raised money from Bain Capital Ventures, who are also tremendous.
And you eventually were able to buy those VCs out, which is an unusual thing.
Yeah, no, the business worked. The business worked, and basically around the 9 or 10 year anniversary, we bought all the shareholders out, and then also
I was one of them,
and he was one of them, so that was good. And then we also resold shares to a newer firm called Frontier Capital.
Yep.
But definitely, It's interesting, looking back, I do view the first business as way more exciting. It was just a wild time, and everyone you knew said, this is a special time. You're early in your career, so you don't even fully know how crazy it is. In the second business, I have loved it because it has been way more predictable. There's so many things that I've enjoyed the second time around, just taking more time to even be able to think about it.
Yeah.
Still 14-hour days. I don't think I'm winning. My wife and my older daughter is out in the audience. I'm winning no work-life balance awards in my household, but I do love what I do.
And I almost hate to ask this question, but I will. Was there anything from the Globe.com experience that you think helped you with MediaRadar and how you run the company now?
So we can't overstate enough how many mistakes we made. I find this crazy. Sometimes you'll see entrepreneurs in their third or second company, and they're like, I don't know what I would have done differently. Nothing. It was fantastic. Look, it was a fantastic experience, but it was riddled with pretty obvious set of mistakes that an early 20-something would make, in particular with 20/20 hindsight. So I think it's everything from knowing how to manage up to your investor base, to have the confidence to fire people who are bad. There are many times when we would hesitate or debate. You won't make that. This is not just for entrepreneurs. Most managers, after 20 years or even 10 years of working, if you have a bad seed in the office, just to get rid of them, fire them, pay them out, whatever the terms. So I think there's much more comfort about just the day-to-day of management that you don't suffer at all.
Right. And let's move on to Steph. So with Slated, it's a complicated business to explain, but why don't you do your best for this audience?
Slated is an online film finance marketplace. So everyone in the world watches movies and television. It's one of the most widely consumed types of media in the world, yet almost nobody understands how it works, how it's financed, what are the mechanics going on behind the scenes. And I wanted to create an online marketplace that would make the whole process of sourcing and assembling and financing and distributing films easier. I'm a movie fan, and I just wanted to see better movies out in the market.
Yeah, so it's like, what gave you the idea? I mean, maybe, did you fall in love with California during the Globe thing? And did you stay there? I mean, are you from there?
Yeah, but that has very little bearing on it. So I was born in Palo Alto. Todd was born in San Francisco. So we both happened to be from that area, but I left when I was 4 and grew up in Switzerland. And then Todd is now a hardcore New Yorker. So I wouldn't say that really had anything to do with anything we're doing now. I am back in LA now because it makes sense for the business I'm in. And what was the inspiration for it was just that I was a movie fanatic growing up. In fact, while we were running the Globe, when we had the most stressful days, Todd and I would sometimes escape on a weekday afternoon and go watch a movie just to clear our heads and have a 2-hour moment of clarity. And for me, that was just something I didn't realize it would play such an important part in my career. But what I'm doing now, essentially allows me to marry everything we ever learned about internet and social and everything that the internet has become now in terms of the reinvention of the movement of capital with crowdfunding and peer-to-peer lending and my passion for film. So I've managed to merge all these things together for a business and a purpose that I'm passionate about. And I would say that was the key thing from the Globe experience, no matter what. Work from first principles. Figure out that thing that you know is true. So like in Elon Musk's case, we need to evacuate Earth and become a multi-planet species. Let's work backwards from there. Well, in my case, it's everyone needs to be entertained, and certainly in a future of automation and AI, when there's mass unemployment, people are going to need more entertainment, more edutainment, and you guys can already see with the streaming wars that are going on that everyone now needs 3 hours a day of quality programming to feed all of us at home and in the theater. Everyone's going for subscription models. All these major streaming companies now need to acquire 10 times more content than they have before, and we happen to have the only online marketplace supplying that content. So after 5-6 years of painstaking work, Slated now happens to be the biggest online film marketplace. And we have 150 films a year getting released. Half of all the films that you guys are hearing about getting nominated for Academy Awards are made by our directors, our producers, our writers. They're all on this marketplace. We're not making a dime of profit. I've been doing this all for free. I've been in a position where I've fortunately been able to self-finance the last 4 or 5 years. And let me tell you, every time I've tried to go raise money from VCs, the minute I mention film and television, their eyes glaze over. It's a world they do not understand.
True.
And so I'm like, okay, forget it. I'm just going to keep financing this and keep moving it along and keep capturing the market.
So what is the business model? I mean, you must want to make money.
So we're a marketplace. And the vision all along was if we're a marketplace and we power the marketplace, why can't we take a percentage of every single film? And it turns out we can. So we finally, a few months ago, launched our paywall. And now we ask all filmmakers, in exchange for us helping match your film to a director, a producer, a writer, investor, a distributor, are you willing to give us 1%, 2%, 3%, 4%, 5% of the budget?
A budget, okay.
Of the budget. And it turns out that filmmaking is so damn hard, and every time a movie or TV show gets made, people in the industry say this is a miracle. And let alone if they win awards, it's a miracle. So anything that can help build up their team, their package, and get the film greenlit, they're willing to give you a reasonable percentage of the budget. And so now we have hundreds of films that have signed on to these agreements, are willing to give us a percentage of everything. The dollar volume of what this could represent would be enormous. I have yet to collect $1, so I'm going to see how next year plays out. But the industry is paying attention now.
Why is that? Why have you not collected $1?
Because I was too busy.
Film releases?
I was too busy tinkering, trying to figure out how would we make this work. So when you first, it's one thing if there's a really well understood market and you're doing a little tweak on it, right? Everyone understands unit economics of the existing model. We're going to tweak it and make our money this way instead. But when you take an industry that's been completely offline and say we're going to move it completely online, and it's an industry built on introductions. And people don't value introductions necessarily on a percentage basis. They value it as, hey, I'm going to be a producer on your movie. You're going to hire me. You're going to pay me this fee. And now it's an online thing where you're going to be matched automatically. And we're going to take 0 until your product gets greenlit. And at the point of green light, will you give us a percentage? People are just saying yes. So it's a new approach. It's a new model. So
you're waiting for a bunch of green lights?
Yeah, no, we had tons of green lights already, but they were all for free. No contract required. And the reason I didn't want to burden anyone with trying to build a completely new marketplace where I'm trying to first convince people, hey, notable producer, director, you're already successful. Would you be willing to sign up to this new online way of doing things? Well, most people will say, well, no. I'm not going to join some sort of Kickstarter-esque thing. I'm already successful. Well, it's not like Kickstarter. It's different. Would you be willing to do it for free? There's no risk. Okay, great. So we got people to sign up. Would you be willing to list a good movie? Well, that could be embarrassing. What if it doesn't succeed? Well, no one will know about it. It'll be on the DL, and if it succeeds, then it gets announced. Okay, and it won't cost you anything. All right, I'll give you my hardest to make movie over here. Let's do it quietly. We succeed. And we repeat this process, repeat this process, repeat this process, and it finally gotten to a point where we've had so many successes that the barrier to trying it out, there's no more risk, it's not embarrassing, half the industry or more is already signed up, and now after years of building goodwill at my personal expense, I'm saying, okay, would you guys be willing to give a percentage? And I was waiting for people to go, oh, whoa, no. But instead they're like, yes, you're saying you'll do all of this work for us and give us all the tools and all the network for free, and if it works, only then we pay? Yes. Well, that's infinitely better than how the industry's been working all along. So it's a game changer, and I'm just at that point through the sales funnel now where I'm waiting for the money to come out.
Right.
Okay, let's see.
Well, I hope it works. I mean, it sounds fantastic.
Oh yeah, you and me both.
Yeah.
And my shareholders.
Yeah, your shareholders, right. And are you going to keep growing MediaRadar? Are you expecting to exit? We've heard a lot of people today talk about, and I agree with them, by the way, you don't work to an exit. Exits happen for good companies. Is the goal for you, though, there must be a lot of companies that would be interested.
So I'm not looking
and
to
just think of how happy your wife and kid would be. Right?
So no, I'm not looking to exit. We have almost doubled the size of the company in the last 2 years since we had the change in ownership.
Yep.
And it's been great. I think it just goes back to like, do you like what you're doing? Can you use the platform? Like one common theme between the two of us is we've spent the last 10 years building the next thing you're working on. And this is common, right? Whether you're Laundress or Slated or MediaRadar, it does take time to build a platform, to build the name and the brand and goodwill to you individually and your staff. So no, I'm not looking to jump ship. If anything, I view that all that goodwill now I'm deploying more aggressively.
Right, but of course now you do have a big investor, and that investor will need to exit at some point.
Yeah, it's interesting. In the early days, we used to have first of all, the market was different years ago where you basically were either an ongoing private concern or public. And maybe you got acquired. But in today's world, that's not at all the case. In fact, this is for anyone who's starting a company or just a business person. I think there's so much more liquidity in the market, private liquidity through private equity and growth equity, that you can keep swapping investors every 5 to 10 years at your discretion. And you can find investors, and this is, I think, such a change over the years, you can find investors who have an appetite for growth at 50% a year, at 5% a year. You can package it with whatever dividends or other sort of benefits you're going to offer. But I think it allows you to keep growing your business in a way that was more difficult in the past.
Yep.
And that's about to go into hyperdrive because of blockchain. And I think that I don't want, is anyone here working on anything blockchain or crypto related? No.
There must be some.
One hand.
So the big audience that tuned in to watch Valley of the Boom were the crypto community. And a lot of them were shocked. I was reading on Twitter, just constantly conversations, oh my God, there once was a boom just like this 25 years ago. So I was amazed to know how young this next generation is, that they had no idea there was a .com boom and bust, and there was just now a major crypto boom and bust. But the whole promise of blockchain, and I'm just excited to be around this whole new revolution. We're at the beginning right now of a completely new internet being invented. And we all sort of nod with what does Steph mean by that? I think I get it. There's a new infrastructure being built that's going to decentralize again all that power that has been centralized with the Amazons and Facebooks and shareholders. And so when it comes to what Todd was just mentioning about, you can now swap in and out investors. Yeah, there's way more people now are investing into private companies. Private companies are staying private a lot longer and holding off IPOs, and I think overall that's a good thing, except when they're money-losing operations who try to then take their company public at the last second and implode. But the getting in and out is still a little bit hard to do. But the promise of blockchain and the tokenization of all assets is it'll actually make it so that all things are liquid all the time. So you could be constantly trading in and out investors as you go. In fact, they will trade themselves in and out. You'll just keep dipping in to go raise more money as you need to. But you will no longer have that almighty patron, that one big investor who's the tail trying to wag the dog. And so my only other advice would be, until we enter that time where you can trade in investors seamlessly and invisibly, be super careful who you pick as your investor. Because small investor or big investor, they get very loud. And if you pick the wrong investor who doesn't have great advice and for their own personal financial needs, that 50 grand they gave you is everything, they will be breathing down your neck, usurping all your free time, and trying to drive the car from the back seat. So you've got to be very careful with the investors you pick. If you need to wait, and we passed on many investors who were willing to write big checks for the Globe early on, but they're just dubious enough, and our instincts were just aware enough that there were some yellow flags, and Todd and I were like, wait, let's hold off. And we held off and held off and held off. And then we landed Michael Egan, who wrote a $20 million check, and that was amazing in many ways, and then turned into something also a little more challenging for us later. So you never know what you're going to get, but if you find the right investor, they become like a parent, a mentor. They're there for you. The money and the return becomes secondary, and it's all about giving you good advice when you need it.
Yep. You're going to add something, Todd, to that?
I was going to say in a trade-off between a bad investor and getting your 10th credit card, I would do the credit card. It's just the raising capital is It is just people, we would talk about it all the time. Choosing a partner is like getting married. Choosing your investor is like getting married. You're just going to be doing this for so many years. And most entrepreneurs, we know when things do go wrong, the conflict is often not with employees, it's with investors.
Yep, absolutely. Let's take a couple audience questions and then we'll wrap this up for the day. Got microphone up here, one hand.
So let's say we live in a decentralized universe now, and every asset that can be bought or sold is bought or sold by public money rather than just by private money or public money if it goes public. What on earth happens to asset prices? Do you still have publicly traded companies that disclose information and privately traded companies that have their tokenized assets traded in the same way but with private information? How does the marketplace of information completely change to match the marketplace of assets?
I don't think that's knowable. I mean, honestly, what happens in a world where everything's tokenized? Can anyone here make a guess as to what's going to happen? Because I can't. I could see, so I always see things through a little more of a utopian lens. Like when we start a virtual community, well, that'll be amazing. You'll have virtual family for life. You'll be able to connect with people with like interests from around the world. Oh, but there'll also be a dark side where if it's free, your information's being sold off and weaponized against you. Oh, right. There'll be social media addiction. Oh, right. Everyone will be looking at their photos on Instagram and liking and counting likes. Oh, right. Now, does that take away from the overall net positive of what social has done and how it's rebalanced the world and created more global villages? No, I think there's a net positive. But so when it comes to blockchain, again, I put on my utopian vision and I think of what it can do to address today's problems. Too much power has become centralized with government and also with corporations. And we now see what happens when corporations, whose number one mission is shareholder value, do in terms of short-term thinking that will maximize profit. We can't do that anymore, right? We need to start treating citizens like shareholders. We need to treat global citizens like shareholders of the planet. But let's treat all citizens as part of one mission. And so the shareholder value becomes really community, citizen value. And the whole premise of blockchain is that with smart contracting, it makes it way easier to actually implement this type of thing, this type of gamification where we all share in the stakes and we all can become recipients of dividends from GDP. I mean, I'm going super macro here. So I'm always looking at what's the positive possibility. Of course, there's a permanent battle between centralization and decentralization and total privacy and total transparency. And we never know where the pendulum is going to swing and what the new negative will be. So what you're asking is a good question that I don't think we can have an answer to.
Yeah, I'm going to go on record. I could never have answered that question, ever, because I don't understand it, but I'm glad you did. No slight. I'm sure it was a great question. It went right over my head. So thank you for answering it. Who else? Go ahead.
You said that the internet is undergoing, like there's building a new internet and the current giants will be destabilized. Sorry, but could you please explain a bit more on why that will happen, why the giants won't survive or just adapt, and in how many years you think this will happen?
Do you want to give her the exact date again?
Okay, so in 2049. So sorry, can you just, the question is, when is this new internet going to start happening and what's going to happen to the current internet?
Well, and how Amazon,
Right.
Facebook,
How do they
Google will get stabilized.
So we're right at the beginning. New plumbing is being figured out. So this is pre-internet 1.0, right? Before Netscape and the globe.com, there was DARPA laying down networks between universities, right? And then TCP/IP had to be built, and HTML, and I don't want to bore you guys with all that, but all these layers had to be built, and no one knew, like, well, what are you going to ultimately do with that? Oh, well, new business models will appear on top of it. We're right at the point right now where people are still just trying to get the protocol for all these different blockchains to scale, because they're brilliant at an unscalable level, and now they're trying to figure out how to make them completely scalable. So I think it's still going to take a decade or more to iterate through these versions before it scales on a global level, and then business models get built on top of that, a la the Globe and Netscape, and profits will start to accrue to some of those companies, but the promise is that more of the services, the social services, the movement of capital services will be baked into the fabric of the internet. So if we wanted to all socialize with each other, we each will own our own online identity. We'll be able to interact with each other through the equivalent of how Facebook or WhatsApp feels, except Zuckerberg doesn't own either of them. The community owns them. So it would be a little bit more akin to how electricity and telecommunications are, I don't know if they're government subsidized, mostly these are private companies, but a lot of that infrastructure has been laid down by the government and costs are controlled and things are categorized as utilities, and you can sort of trust that your electricity is going to work and your telephone network's going to work and the bills don't get totally out of control. So that equivalent will happen for all the social and monetary and eventually the bigger promise, self-governance. Right? So you won't need as big a government apparatus to provide the very same services we have right now. How long is this going to take? Decades. And it will be a gradual transition. It's not like you're going to have to switch over one day from Internet 1 to Internet 2. There'll be a hybrid that will gradually transition. No differently than when you were using the Internet and eventually used an iPhone, you discovered that you have the Internet there, and it wasn't a jarring change. It was just a device change, but really the same Internet.
Hey,
I don't know if that answers the question.
Well, I think so. Do you teach? I mean, I'm just thinking, you might want to think about this. If this job doesn't work out, if you can't get that green light, I mean, you probably...
I'll know next year. So next year I might become a professor. If
a professor job. It might just be an adjunct, but that'd be okay. You can say what you want. It's fascinating, actually. Okay, one more question. Is there one more? I can't...
Yeah, there is.
Great. Oh, I see a hand. This pass the mic thing is kind of funny, but it works.
Hi. Question for Stephan. In the spirit of bridging film and blockchain, have you given much thought towards video rendering across blockchain yet?
Video what?
Like video rendering?
Video rendering.
No, not yet. But again, it's because the infrastructure is too immature, and we've just gone through a mania of crypto everything. And so I wanted to, this time around, I didn't want to be first with anything crypto. I would rather be third or fourth through revolutions until it's stabilized. So I learned my lesson from the Globe versus the Facebook days. But yes, I'm thinking about it all the time. What are the different applications of blockchain and crypto for the film space? And ultimately, from a rights management, as well as letting people trade in and out of films. So right before a movie comes out, sort of the equivalent of a Hollywood stock exchange, where wouldn't it be neat if you could buy shares of major A-list actor or a major movie that's coming out, or trade out of those positions. I think that would actually create engagement from consumers of the content. But doing it the right way is really hard. And first, just because you can trade in and out of an asset doesn't mean you should. So first, we're trying with Slated to accumulate the most investment-grade assets we can. We have analytics systems, machine learning systems to help guide people who don't know about how to invest in film or television as to how to do it smartly. Don't invest in these types of assets. They typically underperform. Invest in these types that typically overperform. But we're going to do it through traditional means, eventually tokenize the whole thing. But I think, again, we're years away from that. There's no rush. Like, let's do it safely and smartly and not be the first, and you become a scam and everybody gets burned.
Excellent. Guys, thank you so much. It was perfect.
Sorry.